Lake Tahoe is terminal. That's a technical way to explain water is not flowing out of the lake. Now, it won't always be like this, but the consequences of an extended drought go beyond the water line.
Most lakes let the past rot away. Lake Tahoe does the opposite. It is so cold, so deep, and so impossibly clear that whatever sinks to the bottom is not destroyed. It is preserved, held in place exactly as it went down.
California state parks have developed Tahoe's first underwater trail. It's called the Emerald Bay State Park Maritime Heritage Trail.
For years, the deepest parts stayed out of reach. Then the water levels dropped, the divers went down, and the lake finally revealed what it had been quietly holding on to. What they found was not a shipwreck and not a monster. It was something that should not still be intact, something the cold had been hiding on purpose. The clearest water. Here is what you have to understand about that water first, because it changes everything that comes after. Lake Tahoe sits at more than 6,000 feet of elevation, up on the line between California and Nevada, in a basin that a fault tore open millions of years ago. It is the largest alpine lake in North America and the second deepest lake in the United States. Only Crater Lake in Oregon goes further down. And down is the word that matters, because the floor of Tahoe drops more than 1,600 feet into a cold, black trench that almost nothing living ever visits. The clarity is what stops people cold. On a calm morning, you can stand on the shore and look straight down through dozens of feet of water to the sand and granite below, clear as glass. It looks pure. It looks like the most pristine water on Earth. But that clarity is not a sign of life down there. It is the opposite. Almost nothing grows in Tahoe. The granite gives up barely any nutrients. The cold shuts down the biology that clouds warmer lakes. And so, the water stays empty. And empty water is see-through water. Now, hold on to that, because this is where it turns. For most of the year, the deep water and the surface water barely touch. The top of the lake gets the sun and the warmth. The bottom sits in permanent darkness, a few degrees above freezing, and it stays that cold every month of every year, decade after decade. Anything that sinks past a certain depth drops out of the world you know and into one that never changes. It does not warm up in July. It does not thaw, and it does not, if it can help it, give anything back. What divers found. For years, the bottom of Lake Tahoe was a rumor even to the people who loved it. Everyone had a story about what might be down there. Nobody had actually gone and looked, not systematically, not the whole way around. Then a group of divers decided to stop wondering and start counting. The nonprofit is called Clean Up the Lake, founded by a diver named Colin West. And what they set out to do had never been attempted at that scale. Scuba teams would work the entire perimeter of Lake Tahoe, mapping and hauling up whatever people had dropped, dumped, and lost over more than a century. Dozens of miles of shoreline, multiple diving seasons. By the time they finished circling the lake, they had pulled up tens of thousands of pounds of debris and logged the position of every heavy thing they could not carry. And this was not a smash and grab operation. Every heavy object the divers could not lift got its exact position marked and logged, which meant that, for the first time, somebody was building a real inventory of what actually lies on the floor of Lake Tahoe, instead of just trading rumors about it over a beer. And that distinction matters far more than it sounds, because the moment you stop guessing and start writing down what is really down there, mapping it, cataloging it, photographing it, you also start running headfirst into the things that were never supposed to be written down at all. The lake had kept its inventory private for 100 years. Now, piece by piece, it was being read back out loud. Most of it was ordinary, in the saddest possible way. Bottles by the thousand, tires, fishing line, sunglasses that slid off somebody's face on a summer afternoon and sank out of reach. And then, scattered in among the junk, the finds that made the divers stop and stare. A diamond ring slipped off a hand and swallowed by water too clear to hide it and too deep to ever get it back. A no littering sign, lying face up on the lake bed in the middle of all that litter, like a joke nobody meant to tell. And every one of those objects said the same quiet thing. Everything lost in Tahoe tends to stay exactly where it fell. If a place that quietly refuses to let go of anything is the kind of thing that keeps you up, do yourself a favor and subscribe before we go deeper, because it only gets stranger from here. This channel goes looking for the stories that sit just under the surface of places you thought you knew, the ones nobody drags into the light until a drought, or a diver forces the issue. Stay with me. We are about to leave the shallows, because the divers were not just finding trash. Out in the deeper, lonelier stretches, their lights started catching the outlines of old cars, engine blocks half sunk in silt, lampposts, and near one point along the shore, timbers that looked like the planks of a wooden boat that had gone down so long ago that nobody alive remembered it happening. And the deeper the teams pushed, the less it felt like scattered litter, and the more it felt like a sequence, a pattern, as if the lake had been quietly collecting these things on purpose and filing them away in the cold, waiting for somebody to finally come down with a light and start asking questions. And a car is a different thing from a bottle. A bottle is an accident. A car is a decision. Somebody drove it, or pushed it, or rolled it off a bank into water deep enough that they never expected to see it again. In most lakes, that car would be a shapeless lump of rust inside a couple of decades. Not here. The cold slows the corrosion to a crawl, so the doors still carry their door handles, and the shape is still unmistakably a car. Which is exactly why a diver's light hitting one in the dark can make the heart stop for a second before the brain catches up. Because for one bad moment, before you count the years, the first instinct is to check whether anyone is still inside. The cold keeps. So why does the cold do that? Why does Tahoe hold onto a whole car for 50 years when another lake would have eaten it? It comes down to the three things that rot actually needs, and the fact that the bottom of this lake starves it of all three. Decay needs warmth to drive the chemistry. It needs oxygen to feed the rust and the microbes. And it needs living things, bacteria, and scavengers to physically take a thing apart. Down at the bottom of Tahoe, all three run out. The temperature sits a few degrees above freezing and never moves. The pressure is crushing. The dark is total. And the water is so starved of nutrients that the little community of organisms that would normally consume whatever sinks is barely there at all. Put it together, and the deep basin stops behaving like a lake. It behaves like a walk-in freezer with the door locked from the outside. Scientists have known this about Tahoe for a long time. Researchers at the UC Davis Tahoe Environmental Research Center have watched the lake continuously since the late 1960s, tracking its clarity, its temperature layers, the slow strain that people put on it. This is careful, peer-reviewed, public work, and it is not in the business of chasing ghosts. But it keeps circling back to the same uncomfortable fact. Whatever goes deep enough into Lake Tahoe does not necessarily come back and does not necessarily fall apart. And there is a practical reason those scientists watch so closely, one that has nothing to do with the dark stuff. Over the last half-century, they have measured the lake's legendary clarity slowly slipping, the transparency fading as fine sediment and nutrients wash in off a developing shoreline. That is the fight they actually care about, the living lake and its future. But it means there are people who know the deep water of Tahoe better than almost anyone alive. And when even they describe the bottom as a place that gives up its contents reluctantly, if at all, you start to understand why the oldest rumor about this lake has never once died. Which brings us, the way every conversation in Tahoe eventually does, to the bodies. The question locals ask. Ask the people who actually work on Lake Tahoe what visitors want to know first. And the answer is strange enough that it stays with you. Not the fish, not the view, not the depth. They want to know if there are bodies down there. That question did not come from nowhere. It came from history. In the middle of the 20th century, the Nevada shore turned into a glittering strip of casinos and lodges, a mountain playground with money pouring through it, and, the way money went in those days, organized crime running quietly underneath. The Cal Neva Resort up on the North Shore, once partly owned by Frank Sinatra himself, became infamous when Sinatra lost his gaming license, over allegations that he had hosted a notorious crime boss there. Around that world of casinos and back rooms, a piece of folklore took root and never let go. It said that people who crossed the wrong men sometimes disappeared, and that the lake, cold and deep and endlessly discreet, was the perfect place to make a problem go away for good. And the era handed that legend its whole cast. Through those decades, the Tahoe and Reno corridor drew figures whose business was done well out of public view, and the region earned a reputation as a place where an inconvenient person could simply vanish. None of that is proof. What it produced was atmosphere, that low hum of a feeling that, if anywhere in America were quietly keeping its dead under cold water, it would be this stretch of the Sierra, and atmosphere, whispered often enough, starts to feel like fact. Then the preservation angle gave the rumor its teeth. Think it through. If the deep water saves things instead of destroying them, then a body sent to the bottom would not rot the way it would in a warmer, shallower place. It would just stay, held in the cold and the dark for as long as the lake felt like holding it. So here is where I have to stop you, because this is the part that matters. It is a legend. That is all it is. There is no verified public record of preserved murder victims ever being pulled from the depths of Lake Tahoe. The divers who spent years mapping that lake bed did not surface a field of bodies. The scientists who study the water have never documented one. The people who run the cleanups have said flat out that the lurid stories going around about hidden mass graves are not what they found. The rumor survives for one reason only. The lake makes it feel possible in a way almost no other place on Earth can. When you have seen with your own eyes that this water can keep a car looking like a car for half a century. The whispered question stops sounding crazy, even though the evidence for it simply is not there. That gap between what the lake could be hiding and what has actually been found is where all of Tahoe's ghosts live, and it is about to get more crowded. The monster and the myth. Because the bodies are not the only thing the depths are supposed to be hiding. Long before the casinos, the water already carried older stories. The Washoe people, who fished this lake for centuries before westward expansion ever reached the Sierra, passed down accounts of a creature living in the water near Cave Rock. Over the generations, that tradition collided with the modern appetite for lake monsters, and out of it came Tahoe Tessie, a Loch Ness-style legend that locals and tourists have been trading for well over 100 years. The sightings are vague. The evidence is non-existent. Tessie belongs to folklore, plain and simple. But, like the bodies, the myth refuses to die, and for the exact same reason. The lake is deep enough and dark enough that nobody can prove what is not there. Then there is the story that gets whispered more than any other, and it is worth handling carefully because so many people believe it. For decades it has been said that Jacques Cousteau, the famous ocean explorer, once took a submersible down into the deepest part of Lake Tahoe, saw something so disturbing that he refused to describe it, and came back up saying the world was not ready for what he had seen. It is a genuinely chilling story. It is also almost certainly not true. There is no solid evidence that Cousteau ever dived Lake Tahoe at all, and the line everyone quotes has never been traced to any reliable source. The legend just keeps getting repeated until people take it for fact. And honestly, it is the perfect example of how this lake works on the human mind. Tahoe so obviously could be hiding something monstrous that people went ahead and invented the discovery to match the mood. But strip all the invented parts away, the bodies nobody found, and the monster nobody filmed, and the quote Cousteau probably never said. And here is the twist. The real lake is stranger than the fakes, and some of what is actually down there you can go and see for yourself. What the lake keeps. In Emerald Bay, on the southwest side of the lake, California State Parks built Tahoe's first underwater trail, the Emerald Bay State Park Maritime Heritage Trail. It runs divers and snorkelers past a set of underwater sites where historic boats and barges, sunk over the decades, have settled into the shallows. Nothing sinister about them. They are pieces of the region's real working and recreational history, kept intact by the very same cold water that preserves everything else in Tahoe. Only now they are cataloged and protected as heritage instead of hidden as secrets. And that trail is the honest answer to the whole mythology. It takes the exact hunger that drives every whispered rumor about the deep, the need to know what is down there, and it just satisfies it, right out in the open. Instead of a rumor about a corpse, you get a real sunken launch resting in clear water exactly where it went down. Instead of an invented Cousteau, you get a mask and a chance to become your own explorer. Tahoe never needed a manufactured mystery. Some of it is real, mapped, and open to anyone willing to get into that cold water and look. So let me bring you back to where we started, the water dropping, the divers going down, the car in the silt with its door handles still attached, and the real question sitting underneath the terrifying one. What was actually down there? Not a monster, not a mass grave, not preserved victims waiting under the ice-cold dark. Whatever the loudest versions of this story online want you to believe. Every one of those collapses the second it meets the people who actually did the diving and the science. What is real is quieter, and somehow it is worse. What the drought and the divers exposed is that Tahoe forgets nothing. Everything that has ever slipped beneath that surface is, in some sense, still down there, still recognizable, still waiting. The cars are still cars. The old hulls are still hulls. The trash of entire generations is still perfectly legible as trash. And because the lake keeps all of it, it also keeps every possibility alive. The bodies nobody ever proved cannot be completely ruled out either, because the one thing this lake will not do is destroy the evidence, one way or the other. It just holds whatever it is handed down there in the dark and lets your imagination finish the job. That is the real terror at the bottom of Lake Tahoe. Not one specific horror, a condition. A place so cold and so still and so clear that nothing is ever truly gone, where the past does not rot away but simply waits, intact, an arm's length past the reach of the light. Every postcard of Tahoe tells the truth about the surface and stays silent about the trench underneath. The water really is that blue. The clarity really is that unbelievable. And down below, all that beauty. 1,600 feet into the dark, the lake goes right on, keeping its long, cold, patient record of everything anyone ever tried to leave behind. If this story pulled you under, subscribe and stay, because the deep places of the world are full of records like this one, waiting for a drought or a diver to bring them up. And here is the question worth leaving in the comments. If Lake Tahoe truly keeps everything that sinks into it, intact and preserved in the cold and the dark, would you want the lake fully explored and every secret finally brought to the surface? Or are some things better left where the water can hold them? Tell me where you stand and what you think is still waiting down there.